11:51 p.m. on a Tuesday. The kind of rain that doesn't just fall, but hammers against the windows like it's trying to break in. I was sitting at my kitchen island, the butcher block I'd sanded down by hand 3 years ago, going over landscape blueprints for a client. The house was quiet, not empty quiet, but peaceful quiet. The way a home feels when every corner, every fixture, every shadow belongs to you. My phone buzzed against the wood. Just once. A single notification cutting through the sound of the storm. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from my mother, Susan. No greeting, no preamble, just a photo. I zoomed in. It was a picture of my own front door, the vintage oak door I'd salvaged from a demolition site and refinished in a deep, glossy navy. But taped to the center of it, ruining the finish, was a white piece of paper with bold legal text. Before I could process the image, the text message followed. We've reviewed the deed. Technically, the land is still ours. Since Alexis lost the condo, she needs the cottage. You have 48 hours to vacate. Leave the keys. I stared at the words. The blue light of the phone screen illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. Since Alexis lost the condo. My sister, the golden child. The one who had been gifted a $900,000 downtown apartment 3 years ago while I was handed the keys to a rotting, mold-infested shack on the edge of the marshlands. I had turned that shack into a sanctuary. I had gutted the rot, rewired the walls, and laid the floors plank by plank. I had built a life here. And now, because Alexis had squandered her fortune, they were simply repossessing mine. A second notification popped up. Alexis had hearted the message. The cruelty of that tiny red heart hit me harder than the eviction notice. It wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a transfer of power. It was a reminder that in the ecosystem of my family, I was merely a placeholder. A steward of assets until the rightful owner, my sister, decided she needed them. 48 hours. 2 days to dismantle 3 years of sweat equity. 2 days to accept that I was homeless. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I set the phone down on the butcher block, the wood cool against my fingertips. Outside, the rain intensified, drowning out the sound of my own breathing. They thought they had sent an eviction notice. They didn't realize they had just declared war. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My hand hovered over the reply button, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of restraint. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type out every sacrifice, every splinter I'd pulled from my fingers while rebuilding the stairs, every weekend I'd spent sleeping on a mattress in a construction zone while Alexis posted brunch photos from her penthouse. But I stopped. Silence. Silence is louder than a scream. I put the phone down, face down, on the counter. Tears didn't come. Panic didn't set in. Instead, my mind went to the same place it always did when faced with a structural failure, assessment and remediation. I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room. I ran my hand along the custom wainscoting I'd installed last winter, feeling the smooth, seamless joints. I looked up at the vintage copper light fixtures I'd spent 3 months sourcing from estate sales. This wasn't just a house. It was my resume. It was physical proof that I was capable of creating value where everyone else saw garbage. And that's exactly what they were stealing, not the shelter. The value. They wanted the finished product without the process. They wanted the asset without the architect. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain-soaked marshlands. The weeping willows swayed in the wind, heavy and ancient. You want the cottage? I whispered to the empty room. Fine, you can have the cottage. I went back to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and pulled up a specific contact. Jordan. He wasn't just a contractor, he was the only person who had ever looked at my work with genuine respect. I dialed his number. It was midnight, but I knew he'd be awake. Morgan? His voice was rough with sleep. Everything okay? Is it the roof? The roof is fine, I said, my voice steady, cold. But I need a favor. A big one. Name it. I need a crew. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Bring the truck. Bring the heavy tools. What are we building? We're not building, Jordan. We're moving. Moving? You just finished the trim. I know, and I'm taking it with me. There was a pause on the line. Morgan, what are you talking about? My parents are evicting me. They're giving the house to Alexis, but they never transferred the deed. Legally. They own the land and the structure. Okay, but I own the improvements. Every fixture, every cabinet, every inch of flooring I paid for. I have the receipts. I checked the laws on chattel versus fixtures. If I can detach it without structural damage, it's mine. Jordan let out a low whistle. You want to strip it? I want to deconstruct it, surgically. I want to leave them exactly what they gave me. A shell. A rotting, empty shell. Morgan, that's nuclear. No, I said, looking at the eviction notice still taped to my front door. It's equitable. They want the house back. They can have the house, but they don't get the home. 7 a.m. Jordan said, his voice shifting from confusion to professional readiness. I'll bring the crowbars. I hung up. I looked around my beautiful, warm, handcrafted living room one last time. It didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a warehouse of my own stolen labor. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the next 6 hours with a label maker and a roll of blue painter's tape, marking every single item that was leaving. Mine, vintage tub, mine, smart thermostat, mine. By sunrise, the house was covered in blue tags. It looked like a crime scene, or maybe an inventory list for a life I was reclaiming. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the marsh mist, I found myself sitting on the floor of the empty guest room, staring at a specific patch of wall where the plaster was uneven. It was a scar from the water damage I'd fixed 3 years ago. 3 years. It felt like a lifetime. It took me back to the gift day, my 23rd birthday, Alexis's 21st. Our parents had gathered us in the drawing room of their estate, a room that smelled of old money and lemon polish. We have decided to give you your inheritances early. My father, Robert, had announced, beaming like a philanthropist, so you can start your lives on solid ground. For Alexis, he produced a heavy velvet-lined box. Inside was a set of keys to a downtown condo. Unit 4B at the Spire, my mother, Susan, gushed. $900,000. Floor-to-ceiling windows. It's perfect for you, Lexi. You're the face of this family. You need a place that matches your sparkle. Alexis had squealed, hugging them both. I'm going to host the best parties. Everyone is going to be so jealous. Then they turned to me. There was no velvet box. My father handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a rusted key and a property deed copy. The Marshlands cottage, he said, his smile tight. I know it's rough, Morgan. It's been sitting empty for a decade since your great-aunt died. But we thought, well, you're good with your hands. You like projects. It's a bit of a mold trap right now, my mother added with a dismissive wave. But you're a worker bee. You'll figure it out. I remember driving out to see it that afternoon. The cottage was sinking into the mud. The porch was rotted through. The smell of mildew was so strong it tasted metallic in my mouth. It wasn't a gift. It was a disposal problem they were outsourcing to me. But back then, I didn't see the insult. I saw the opportunity. Why did I accept it? Why didn't I throw the key back in their faces and demand equality? It's the invisible chain of the survivor. I had spent my entire life believing that love was something you had to earn through labor. Alexis was loved for simply existing. She was the face. I was the hands. I believed that if I could take this ruin and turn it into a palace, I would finally prove my worth. I thought if I fixed the house, I would fix their perception of me. I thought sweat equity could buy affection. So I took the key. I thanked them. And I spent every waking hour for the next 3 years scraping black mold off the beams, convincing myself that every layer of grime I removed was bringing me closer to being seen. I was wrong. I wasn't earning their respect, I was just increasing their property value. The sound of a heavy diesel engine cut through my memories. I looked out the window. Jordan's truck was pulling into the driveway, the trailer hitch rattling. The chain was broken now. I wasn't the worker bee anymore. I was the demolition expert. I stood up, dusting the phantom plaster from my jeans. The survivor was gone. The architect was clocking in. By 9 a.m., the living room was unrecognizable. Jordan and his crew moved with the efficiency of a pit stop team. There was no smashing, no reckless destruction. Every screw was backed out and saved. Every piece of trim was pried loose with precision tools to avoid cracking the wood. We wrapped the copper light fixtures in bubble wrap and stacked them in the truck. My phone started buzzing again. I ignored it until we took a water break. It was a barrage of messages from my mother. Don't take the custom light fixtures. Alexis loves them. I snorted. Alexis loved them? Alexis had never set foot in this house until the renovation was finished. She didn't know a sconce from a chandelier. Then a text from Alexis herself. Make sure the floors are waxed before you go. I have a photo shoot scheduled for Monday. The natural light in the living room is perfect for my brand aesthetic. Her brand aesthetic. She was already planning her content calendar around my trauma. Then another from my father. Leave the keys under the mat by 5 p.m. tomorrow. We'll do a walkthrough. If there's any damage, we'll be deducting repairs from your security deposit. Security deposit? I had never paid a security deposit because I had never signed a lease. But the audacity of it, the assumption that they held all the cards, that they could not only kick me out but bill me for the privilege, stoked the fire in my chest. They truly believed they had won. They thought I was currently packing boxes of clothes and books, weeping into a suitcase, grateful they were allowing me 48 hours to vacate. They couldn't conceive of a world where I fought back. They think you're waxing the floors, Jordan said, reading the text over my shoulder. He shook his head, wiping sweat from his forehead. Let's make sure we leave them spotless, I said, a dark smile forming. Spotless subfloors. The kitchen was next. This was the crown jewel. The navy cabinets, the brass hardware, the marble countertops I'd got at a discount because of a tiny chip in the corner I'd buffed out. Are we taking the island? One of the crew members asked. The island is freestanding, I said. It's furniture. It goes. What about the cabinets? They're screwed in, but not glued. Detachable. Take them. We worked through the afternoon. The house began to echo. The warmth I had painstakingly layered into the rooms was stripped away, layer by layer, revealing the cold, gray skeleton underneath. The rot I had covered up but never truly fixed because the structure belonged to them started to show its face again. The water stains on the subfloor, the drafty gaps around the windows where the trim used to be. It was reversing time. We were unbuilding the house. As we loaded the last of the kitchen cabinets into the truck, my phone buzzed with a final text from my mother. We're excited to see what you've done with the place. Alexis has some great ideas for redecorating, but your foundation work will be a good start. Foundation work. That's all I was to them, the foundation for someone else's skyscraper. You ready for the bathroom? Jordan asked, holding a wrench. The vintage clawfoot tub, I said. It's cast iron. It's heavy. We've got the dolly. Good, I said. Take the plumbing fixtures too, the brass ones. Leave the pipes exposed. I want them to see exactly what they own. We went back inside. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty floorboards. The house looked haunted again. Haunted by the ghost of the girl who thought she could earn her way into a family photo. She was gone now, and she was taking the copper piping with her. By 5 p.m., the truck was fully loaded. Jordan stood on the porch, a clipboard in hand, looking like a battlefield commander, reviewing the casualties. That's everything on the list, he said. Fixtures, appliances, cabinetry, flooring. We even took the switch plates. And the mailbox, I asked? Pulled it out 5 minutes ago. Left the post, though. Figured they might need something to lean on. I walked out to the driveway to grab the last box, my personal files. As I lifted the lid to check the contents, a single envelope slid out from between two folders. It wasn't mine. It was addressed to Robert and Susan, my parents, but it had been mixed in with my mail when I cleared out the old mailbox earlier. The return address was Coastal Equity Bank. Curiosity, cold and sharp, pricked at me. I knew I shouldn't open it. But I also knew my parents. They didn't send mail to my house unless it was a mistake or a threat. I slid my finger under the flap. It was an appraisal confirmation, dated 3 weeks ago. Dear Robert and Susan, based on the recent renovations and market value assessment of the Marshlands property, we are pleased to approve your home equity line of credit for $150,000. The detailed appraisal highlights the new hardwood flooring, custom kitchen, and updated electrical systems as significant value adds. I froze. The world narrowed down to that single piece of paper. They hadn't just decided to kick me out because Alexis needed a home. They had leveraged my renovations to take out a massive loan. They had used the value I created to bail Alexis out of her debt. And the date. 3 weeks ago, that was before they even told me I had to leave. They had brought an appraiser to the property while I was at work. They had walked him through my home, pointing at my floors, my cabinets, my lights, claiming them as their own assets. This wasn't just eviction, it was fraud. They had secured a loan using collateral that, as of 5 p.m. today, no longer existed. Morgan? Jordan asked, stepping off the porch. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I handed him the letter. He read it, his eyes widening. 150 grand, he muttered. They bet the farm on this place. They bet my farm, I corrected. They committed bank fraud, Jordan. They claimed improvements they didn't pay for and didn't own. And now, Jordan said, looking back at the empty, stripped-down shell of a house, those improvements are currently sitting in the back of my truck. A dark, dangerous laugh bubbled up in my throat. Any lingering shred of guilt, any tiny voice whispering that maybe I was being too harsh, vanished instantly. What happens to an equity loan when the equity disappears, I asked. Jordan grinned, a sharp, wolfish expression. The bank calls the loan. Immediately. And if they can't pay, foreclosure, I finished. This was the kill shot. They hadn't just lost a free house for Alexis. They had walked into a financial bear trap of their own making. Let's go, I said, climbing into the passenger seat of the truck. I want to be down the road before they get here. I want them to walk into this alone. As we pulled away, I watched the house in the side mirror. It looked small, sad, a gray box sitting in the mud. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a liability. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely, utterly light. The 48-hour deadline arrived with the precision of a guillotine. At 4:55 p.m., a moving truck lumbered up the driveway, followed closely by my parents' SUV. I watched from Jordan's truck, parked just around the bend of the marsh road, hidden by the willow trees. I shouldn't have stayed. I should have been halfway to the state line. But I needed to see it. I needed to see the moment the illusion broke. Alexis was the first out. She wore white jeans and carried a bottle of champagne, ready to christen her new cottagecore lifestyle. She marched up to the front door, key in hand, beaming. My parents followed, looking benevolent and satisfied, the lords of the manor bestowing charity upon their favorite subject. Alexis unlocked the door. She pushed it open. From where I sat, I couldn't see inside, but I didn't need to. I knew what she saw. She saw subfloors stained with 3-year-old watermarks. She saw walls scarred with holes where cabinets used to hang. She saw exposed pipes jutting out like broken bones. She saw darkness, because I had taken every light bulb. The scream wasn't immediate. It took a few seconds for her brain to process the vacuum, but when it came, it was shrill, piercing the quiet marsh air. Mom, Dad. My parents rushed inside. A moment later, they stumbled back out onto the porch, their faces pale, mouths agape. My mother was clutching her chest. My father looked like he'd been punched. "It's gone!" Alexis wailed, dropping the champagne bottle. It shattered on the concrete, the only thing sparkling in the gray evening. "Everything is gone!" "Morgan!" my father bellowed, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. He spun around, scanning the property, looking for me. I started the engine. The rumble of the heavy truck drew their attention instantly. I pulled out from the trees and drove slowly up the driveway, rolling down the window as I stopped beside them. "You destroyed it!" my mother shrieked, rushing toward the truck. "You vindictive little! You destroyed our house!" "I didn't touch your house," I said, my voice calm, cutting through her hysteria. "I took my house. The structure is yours. The rot is yours. The swamp is yours. Everything I paid for is in the back." "We'll sue you," my father shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "We'll have you arrested for theft. That was our property." Was it? I reached into the passenger seat and held out the envelope from Coastal Equity Bank. "Is that what you told the bank when you leveraged my renovations for a $150,000 loan?" My father froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. "I opened your mail, Dad. By accident, of course, but it was very illuminating." I tossed the letter onto the gravel at his feet. "Bank fraud is a felony. And since the collateral for that loan just drove away, I'd say you have bigger problems than a missing bathtub." I looked at Alexis. She was sobbing on the porch steps, not even looking at the house anymore, just mourning the loss of the aesthetic she felt entitled to. "You wanted the cottage, Alexis," I said. "You got it. It's empty, just like you." It was the illusion of power of the empty wallet. Alexis had relied on having the condo, the status, the inheritance, without ever being. She had no skills, no resilience, no substance. Without the external props funded by her parents, she collapsed. The house standing behind her was now a perfect mirror, a hollow shell with no inner value. "Fix it!" Alexis screamed at our parents. "You said it was ready. You said I could move in." They can't fix it, I said, putting the truck in gear, because they don't know how to build anything. They only know how to take. I rolled up the window, muting their screams, and drove away. I didn't look back at the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see the ruins anymore. I carried the blueprint for the next castle in my head. The sun was setting as Jordan and I parked the truck on a plot of land I had bought 3 months ago. It was an acre of high ground far away from the marsh, surrounded by ancient oaks. I hadn't told anyone about it. Not my parents, not Alexis. It was my secret. My escape plan. We unloaded the truck in silence. The navy cabinets, the vintage tub, the brass fixtures. Every piece of that cottage had a new home here. I wasn't just storing materials, I was laying the groundwork for something that would be entirely undeniably mine. Jordan wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the truck. "You know, most people would have just burned it down," he said. "It would have been easier. Burning it down destroys the value." I said, running my hand over the smooth surface of the butcher block island, and I worked too hard to create that value. I wasn't going to let them have it, but I wasn't going to let the fire have it either. So, what happens to them now? "The bank will foreclose," I said. "They can't pay back the loan without the collateral. They'll lose the land. They'll lose their credit. And Alexis," I paused, thinking of my sister sobbing on the porch. "Alexis will have to learn how to survive without a safety net." It wasn't malice I felt. It was clarity. I had spent my life trying to earn my place in their world, only to realize their world was built on debt and deception. I had walked away from a crumbling empire, carrying the only thing that mattered, my own competence. I looked out at the clearing where the foundation for my new house would go. I wasn't starting from scratch, I was starting from experience. This is the justice of the seed sower. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes the most powerful act of justice is to take the seeds you planted in barren soil and move them to fertile ground. My parents and Alexis were left with the rot they had cultivated. I was left with the harvest of my own labor. I didn't just leave them with nothing, I left them with themselves. And I took my magic with me. "Ready to start framing next week?" Jordan asked, interrupting my thoughts. I smiled, a genuine, bone-deep smile. "I've already got the blueprints." I climbed into my own car and drove away from the site. The evening air cool and clean. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced at it. It was a text from my mother, a long paragraph of pleas and accusations. I didn't read it. I deleted the thread, then I blocked the number. I was the architect of my own peace now, and I had a lot of building to do. If you've ever had to rebuild from the ashes of someone else's fire, share this story. Remember, you are the architect of your own peace. See you in the next video.